And we're live. Welcome back to an episode of the Social Kick Podcast, a special episode with a really full crew today. I'm Brian Lundquist, joined by Dr. John Mullen, Luke Paddington, and some elite of elite speed. In the pool, Gary Hall Jr., and on the track, Ato Boldon. Thanks for joining, guys. What's going on?
Hello.
I'm good, guys. Good to be with you this evening.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we've been talking about doing this for quite a while, and I think coming from a swimming background, 3 sprinters hosting this show, and we've talked with Gary in the past, one of the things that we've always noticed as swimmers is how there were elements of the sport of swimming that seemed to be perhaps trending behind track and field, or we would start to tinker with maybe some of this innovation starting with Gary, elements of how track athletes, the best of the best, are how are they training versus some of the longer, more endurance training that we saw as swimmers, and that we found we even name in swimming our start on the block after track. We called it a track start, not at Luke's age because he's too old, but at some point we started doing a track start with a foot back, and the innovation followed. And so we wanted to first talk some about the parallels here between the two sports, but also about the characteristics of what it takes to be the elite of elite speed. Not talking about NCAA finals, not talking about that kind of knocking on the door level, but what does it take to be world beating? What's common amongst the uncommon men and women that are in the Olympic final? And who better to talk to than a 2-time Olympic champion and an Olympic finalist and world champion in their respective sports. So we wanted to start this conversation around identifying speed at any level, but physical attributes. So Ato, I want to put it to you with a lens of track and field. What do you feel like are some of physical attributes or mental attributes, and are those important? What is important in forming someone who is elite speed?
I think if you lined up 100 kids, maybe at a high school level, if I got to spend 5 minutes with them, I could tell you who are the ones that could be on an Olympic podium one day. By looking at them. But 5 more minutes of talking to them would actually help me to sort through if my initial wave of cut, so to speak, were even accurate. And that's because, yes, there's physical things I look for. I'll give you a good example. The young lady right now who is considered the absolute best ever in the 100-meter dash is 5 feet no inches tall. Her name is Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, and she hails from Jamaica. In the last 3 Olympic 100-meter finals, she's been 3rd, 1st, and 1st. And I went to UCLA. Flojo was a friend of mine, and people go, there's no way Flojo was the best ever. But the truth is, as athletes, we all know you judge people by who has the championships. Well, she has more world championships than Usain Bolt in the 100, and I just gave you her Olympic record. If she walked into the chat right now, you'd go, that's the fastest 100, that's the greatest 100-meter sprinter ever? Yeah. And it's not because of her actual height, it's her proportions. So I know what proportions to look for. And this is going to sound familiar to you guys, right? Wingspan, hip height, all of that kinds of stuff. But that just gets you in the party, as I say. The question is, can you dance? And that's when we get to the part that for a lot of them separate the wheat from the chaff. And that is, can you withstand the rigors of training? Are you going to quit when it gets hard? And then further to that, when you are in that pressure cooker called the Olympic final, are you going to wilt? Or like my man Gary here, you're going to be like, shooting air guns at the water because you are literally ready for this moment. And you hear this word crazy thrown around a lot. The fact is that I separate Olympic athletes from what I call civilians. The civilians are sitting in the stands and they're like, oh shit. How are they dealing with that pressure? How are the 8 people lining up with the world completely stopped right now watching them? How are they dealing with this? And the reality is you have to have what we put our bodies through and put our lives through for a chance at maybe standing on an Olympic podium means you have to be a little bit crazy. So it's not something that I think people who have been on an Olympic podium like myself, we don't see that as a bad thing. That's a badge of honor. So yes, there is a physical component to it, but man, there's so much more is above the neck.
Gary, what comes to your mind when you think about physical attributes or things that are innate?
In swimming, the best sprinters tend to be taller, longer levers. Whereas in track and field, to add to, I mean, Usain Bolt, I think, is an exception in that he's very tall, but a lot of the best sprinters are compact and powerful. This example that he was just pointing out. In swimming, it's the opposite. The taller swimmers tend to gravitate toward the sprints. It's weight to strength ratios. The more water you're able to displace through those longer levers, legs and arms, the more you're able to achieve a planing type of effect. So those are the typical, the physical. And then, when you talk about talent in the sport, Ian Thorpe had like a size 18 shoe. I call that talent. That's just a natural born. I mean, I'd rather have size 18 shoe than webbed fingers, honestly, if you're looking for an advantage. That is flippers. I mean, look at how many master swimmers use Zoomers. That's not even, with the extension, a size 18. That's not as big as Ian Thorpe's foot. So, big feet, big hands, huge advantages in that physical attribute. But Ato's absolutely right. What makes or breaks is what's in the heart and in the mind. When you get to crazy is a good word. Unorthodox, outside of the box. There's a lot of different terms that sprinters tend to be labeled. A lot of them have walked to the beat of their own drum. Independence. That pressure cooker situation in the Olympic finals. It takes someone who is not immune to fear. They experience it, but when he's talking about what the norm, most people, when they see a fire or danger, they run from it. I think it takes a mentality to run toward it. There's a fearlessness in these individuals that excel at that level, that pressure situation.
Guys, is this speed born? Ato, I want you to tell me your origin story, because I just read today that Hasely Crawford, the 1976 gold medalist, started track when he was 17. I read that Ben Johnson moved to Canada when he was 15 and went under Charlie Francis. You moved to the States. You left the best high school in the world to go to the States. The high school that produced two of the fastest swimmers that Trinidad and Tobago's ever seen. And only recently the second fastest 100-meter runner by 0.01. Anyway, tell me your origin story, because Ato was a soccer player when I knew him. He was this big-time soccer player that I knew. And when I heard that he was a track guy, I was like, what? What happened at 14? What did they see in you? Was it a conversation they had and they saw your mind or they saw your body? What was it?
You'd have to ask him, but I think I got discovered in New York City. I moved here at 14 and had no intentions whatsoever of doing anything in track and field. I had tried track and field. I had tried to sprint back between the ages of like maybe, 10 to 13 back in Trinidad, and had very little success. But the truth is, I look at myself now and I go, yeah, my athletic gifts came late. So to answer your question, Luke, yes, that DNA, that ability, it's in there. Some people discover that it's in there. Other people do not. Some people end up being, hedge fund managers, and it's in there. But a lot of us get discovered because somebody sees something in us that maybe we don't even see in ourselves. This is funny to me still. My neighbor, when I was 8 or 9, saw me playing soccer with the other kids, and went to my father and said, your son has the ability to be a world-beating sprinter. He was a track and field guy. And my father must have laughed for about 10 straight minutes. He was like, my little son is like, he's thin and he's skinny, because he had this image of, you had to be like this to be a world-class sprinter. My father could not connect what he was seeing as, a little young, thin kid, running up and down a hill in Trinidad to world-class stardom. Well, that's okay, but it was in there, and all it takes is for somebody to see it in you. And I think all of us who have been, at a world championships or on an Olympic podium realize that maybe even before we were sure, there was somebody that was pretty sure that what they saw in us was real. And for me, that's an Italian guy called Joe Trupiano at Jamaica High School in Queens. And he was convinced. He saw me going down the wing. And this is, he saw me at 16. And at the time, that was right when I was starting to feel like, whoa, I'm doing things on a soccer field, which I couldn't do 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I'm just gone anytime I wanted. He saw that. He went, how would you like to be in a sport where you control the outcome? Because I see you scoring goals, but your goalie sucks. You guys are losing. And that was literally it for me. Gary, I want to go back to something you said really briefly about the temperament of the upper echelon sprinters, no matter what it is. This is an example that somebody gave me years ago, and I've never forgotten it. They said, have you ever watched horse racing? I said, sure, I watch horse racing. He said, you ever see sometimes when they're loading those horses in at the Kentucky Derby? Do those horses, do they prance a little bit? Like, do all of them just, respectfully get into that starting gate? Or do some of them have an attitude? They go in there like, I'm not ready to go yet. Anytime you see that kind of posturing and preening from somebody whose business is speed at the 0.001% level, remember those horses. It exists everywhere in nature. We civilians call it arrogance, and some people don't. It doesn't. Wide receivers have it too. Civilians don't always like to see it, but the truth is, animals at that level, beings at that level, they have a sense of I'm different, and it's hard sometimes for it to not come out.
Ato, 2000 games, Olympic Village, Trinidad House. You and I had a conversation for like half an hour on the balcony. It was a week before your 100-meter final.
Yeah.
I could not believe the amount of energy that you had. You literally could not keep still. You could not sit in your seat. And it was remarkable. And I was so impressed. And I just knew, like, Ato is going to do something crazy next week. It's going to be, you were on fire 100 before. You felt like a horse getting ready to, like, explode.
Gary, I wanted to ask about
and I actually I've watched for many years horse racing, and I know what you're talking about. I mean, the ones for these animals that are to be controlled, contained, put into a stall, even if it's just like 10 seconds before the gun goes off, right? Like, it's too much. Like, earlier I talked about wild horses, but I remember watching when I watch a horse running, like in the open, like at a Kentucky Derby, when you watch that winning horse just like full throttle, when it's opened up and it's just, there's something graceful in it, but it's just so explosive and violent in so many other ways.
Yes.
It connects with me. Like, I cry. I don't cry often, but when I see that, I relate to that animal when I see a horse running full force.
Yes, like you, I enjoy watching anything. I mean, around my house is like pictures of cheetahs. Anything that is in full flight like that, like you, I connect with it. There's something beautiful about something that can move, as for its species, faster than anything else. That's just my thing. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Gary, I know you're connected to clinics and you often see swimmers on deck, through your dad, connected to people, athletes in the sport. Do you, when you're in those environments, do you feel like you are able to pick out the athletes who've got an element of speed, and are you pulling them aside and saying, hey cowboy, like you need to be thinking about X, Y, and Z for your training because you're different? Have you come across that type of scenario in a young athlete?
Yeah, all the time. Ato mentioned it earlier. I mean, you line up 100 kids, you can spot the 10 that have talent, the 5 that have the men's mindset. I did a clinic recently, and there was one kid. He wasn't the fastest in the pool. He had the most ability. Like he could do it. And and I did. I have to do it privately, right? Like respectful of all the other swimmers there. But like I leaving the pool one evening, I pulled him aside and I was like, "You need to keep swimming. You're really talented, more than you know." And so, yeah, a lot of times, and we talked about it when I was on the show earlier. The sport has lost its most talented prospects. Because it is just such a rigorous, demanding training that is required, but also just the team environment. It's not conducive to those with the proper mindset to be the fastest.
Yeah, obviously talent ID is a popular topic, and I think every sport and a lot of sports are getting more towards looking at the stats, trying to measure certain variables to identify which athletes are going to be the next up-and-coming ones. You guys kind of explain it differently, more of like a holistic feel or holistic view of it. How do you think you guys could identify these things, or can you teach other people and coaches how to identify young talent? Maybe Ato?
I don't know if I could, because I am not even sure I'm not even sure if I could quantify or explain in great detail what it is that I see when I see a young kid running and I go, yes, absolutely. I'll give you an example. I always said I never wanted to coach, and I moved to Florida and I saw the talent here and I said, man, there's a lot of talent being wasted, because I felt like there was an abundance of talent, but the talent was actually better than the coaching. So I kind of got dragged kicking and screaming into coaching, and literally put 2 young girls from the city where I live, Miramar, Florida, onto the all-time high school list in the 100-meter dash. First, so one has the high school record and one's 10th. It's not because I'm the greatest coach in the world. It's because I saw in the 2 of them what could be. But I don't know, if you ask me what it was that I saw, if I could write you a detailed explanation of it. It was attitude, and yes, I was lucky to get them young enough to sort of break some of their bad habits and kind of put them in a system that was almost like a pro system. So it was like they were not going to fail as long as they got on that sort of conveyor belt. But at the same time, I don't know if Luke came to visit and I said, okay, Luke, so here's what you look for when you're looking for, potential future Olympians or Olympic medalists. I don't know if I could, I think it's so ingrained in me I've been watching people run fast I'm 47 for 30 years. So I think so much of it is instinctive and almost subconscious that I don't know if I could teach it to somebody else.
Luke, picture yourself. Now picture the opposite. Now look for that on land.
He never saw me run 100, so he don't know what you're talking about. Ato, but it makes you a great broadcaster because you're able and to look at an athlete behind the blocks and how they're preparing for their race. And I know you're very good at your broadcasting career to identify when somebody's ready and on. And so much so, you can almost call, sport so well, you can call the time to the hundreds. Do you guys see when somebody's ready to be fast when they're on?
Well, if you're talking about, predicting that Usain Bolt was going to win races in the Olympics, Stevie Wonder could see that. But thank you for the compliment. The truth is that because I am a numbers guy. I was a numbers guy to a fault in my career, and I would be the first to tell you I have 4 Olympic medals, none of which is gold. And the critique of me when I was an athlete was an accurate one. I tried to think my way through Olympic finals. That was terrible as an athlete, but I think it's made me a good broadcaster. So when, for example, in 2008, Usain Bolt had broken the 100-meter record, and there was a consensus that he was not going to be able to break the 200-meter record, including the guy who had the record, Michael Johnson at the time, said, no, it took me a while to figure that out. The 100's not the 200, blah, 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 blah. And I went home and I figured out, okay, so this guy ran 9.69 beating his chest. So he's in 9.5 shape. And I wrote down what I thought he would run on the turn. And then I wrote down what I thought he could run in the final. And I literally came to work the next day with a number 19.31. And everybody went, oh, that'll break the record. I went, yeah. And you can check the tape. I said, as long as he does not stop running before the line like he did in the 100, that record is gone. He ran 19.30. That's not because you're a genius. It's because you understand your event, you understand your sport, and then you apply your love and your passion for numbers to something which is in front of you. So I am never afraid to go to the thing which has kept me in broadcasting for now 17 seasons, and that is go to the number. So a lot of the times people go, well, you must have had a feeling. No, I will have studied that sprinter so well for the entire year that I know their trends and their tendencies. I'll give you a quick example. Andre DeGrasse from Canada. He just had his season opener, and he could not have looked worse. He didn't even make the final in this sort of random meet in Arkansas. And there'd be a lot of people that will write Andre DeGrasse off for Tokyo if we go to the Olympic Games. I will not be, because I've studied him since he was at USC, and I know he does not like indoors. He almost never is ready early, but don't count that guy out when the pressure's on in the big race. Oh, by the way, he got second to Bolt in Bolt's 2016 200-meter final and third to Bolt in the 100-meter final. So it's not, yeah, a lot of it is being experienced as a broadcaster, but the truth is I don't rely on abstract stuff. I rely on things that I know to be reliable.
It's Gary, you've talked about the only race you really cared about was the Olympic final, later on in your career. That's when you got ready for, you would go 51 in season for a couple of years. We won't see Gary hold you in 100, and then he'll go make team and knock it. What was that shift? Let's go into mindset. What was that shift that you made? What was that you really cared? You just were ready for that thing. Talk about the Olympic final and draw and that mindset you shifted to.
Well, that shift away from being so competitive, going to all the meets, I think was part of my preparation. That reprieve from the intensity that the sport was allowed me to come back and for an abbreviated period of time, let's say 1 year, I was really able to focus. It was important to not be so far out of it. 51s aren't that impressive, but not too far out that I could, in a year really hone. And so, yeah, people with attention deficit disorder, they have an ability to hyperfocus for brief periods of time. And so that was my approach and training through a quadrennial, 1 year out of 4, let's focus, really, really focus. And then also in the preparations for the competition, the meet itself, too. I could be all over the place. And then, for the 21 seconds or the 48 seconds that it was going to take to compete, to zero in with microscope focus.
Ato, sorry, go ahead. I was going to put it to Ato too, because Ato, you had different maturity in your races from 96 to 2000. We know what happened in 96 with the 3-4 starts, but 2000 had 2-4 starts as well. But yours is a completely different Ato in 2000. Talk about that mindset and where you're ready in maturity.
Yeah, so in 1996, I am one of, I think, three favorites to win the 100, myself, Donovan Bailey, and Frankie Fredericks. And then Linford Christie, who's the defending champion and reigning champion, starts the false start. I'm not so sure that he's not like trying to find a way out, because he was the best Linford was going to finish that night was fourth. And I think he thought that was not the way he wanted to go out, but neither here nor there. Me as the young college senior, I start losing it. Like, come on, like, why is this race not going off? And I am losing energy before the gun even goes off, and I'm going to need once the gun sounds. I end up third in that race. It's probably the only race I'd want to do over. Contrast that with 2000 now, where we're in Sydney and it's a little cold. I think that for me, certainly being from Trinidad, I think that at race time it was like 60, 68, 69 degrees. But it's a completely different mindset from 22 to 26, and now with all this experience of being a pro. You could have set off a grenade somewhere in that stadium. It would not have fazed me, because now this is not my first Olympic final. It's not my first rodeo. I understand what kind of focus it takes to perform at the highest level and to be on that podium again. So yeah, but the thing about experience is nobody can hand it to you in your hand, right? You have to experience these things and go through them before you can even think about calling yourself experienced. And that's why any of you who anybody who goes to their first Olympics and gets that gold medal, I'm like, it's all downhill from here, because if you pull this off in your very first try, it's like, I mean, look at Usain Bolt's first sojourn into the Olympics. He had run 1993 that year. That was a time fast enough to have won or gotten second that year. He doesn't make it out of the first round. It's not because he can't run. He's still, a young Usain Bolt. It's because the moment and the gravity of the moment just overwhelmed him, and he literally lost the first race he was out in the first race he ever ran in the Olympics, and then never lost another one till he retired. There you go.
Gary, you mentioned ADHD helping you focus. Do you have to have ADHD to focus? What is it about, Irvin, who allowed him to win the gold medal back in 2016 again after 20 years or 16 years? What is it about Nathan Adrian that makes him such a consistent performer time and time again? What is it is there something characteristic about, people with that sort of speed that are able to just put all of everything to the side and let one thing come into their mindset, which is the race that they're about to do, and perhaps in some ways not overthink it?
Yeah, I mean, those gentlemen that you mentioned are gentlemen. You have a conversation with Anthony or Nathan, they're so polite, so gracious in so many ways. But somewhere buried below that facade is a badass, right? Somebody who's tough as nails, and not just in the endurance of pain and the training and dealing with setbacks in a I'm not going to let this stop me type of way, but I think that's the common thread. I mean, between the personalities, whether they're attention deficit disorder or not, I don't think that's terribly important. But somewhere below the surface, there has to be a mean son of a bitch.
Well, you certainly showcased some bravado, and perhaps that was a representation of the mean SOB that was underneath the surface that was going to unleash hell on the rest of the competition. I'm just curious about, where did that sort of charisma, that sort of confidence, do you feel like there were others in the sport that came anywhere close to matching that sort of confidence? Could you compare something like Popov's sort of stoic approach to that as someone who raced him?
Yeah, he was cocksure, Definitely. Come on, like he was just brought up in the communist system. It's just expressed in a different way, and that's very but that pride was there, yeah, definitely, and the showmanship. He was every bit as confident, as egotistical, or whatever. That's maybe an inappropriate labeling, as Ato mentioned earlier, whoever, sprinters generally have that label, which isn't fair, it isn't accurate. But yeah, he definitely had that. It just in a different way. I mean, he was just brought up in such a different system that he didn't have the freedom to express it the same way that I chose to.
This is a question for Ato. Usain reminded me of Gary behind the blocks. You mentioned about using up all your energy before the 96 final, just getting annoyed with what was going on and losing it. To me, when I see Usain and his antics behind the blocks, his blowing kisses and stuff, that's purposeful. Does he and Glenn Mills work on that? Because I know as soon as the starter whistle says take your marks, Usain goes woof, and he just controls it. And Gary did the same thing. Gary, was that a purposeful way? I want Ato to answer first. Purposeful way of just controlling your anxiety, your cortisol, just to save it for when it matters.
My generation of sprinters were very stoic, more Popov than Bolt. I look back, every now and then YouTube will throw up one of my old races, and I look at us and I go, I'm not sure that was the best way to have done it. You mentioned Usain Bolt. Most of that came from Usain Bolt's confidence, because if you go back to maybe 2007, when he's the silver medalist at Worlds, he doesn't really have that. He's trying, but I think the nerves and knowing that he's probably not the favorite doesn't allow him to be like that. In 2008, he knew he was faster than everybody else, not only in the world currently, but in the history of the world. But I think he did tap into something by the antics before, and sort of not spending any energy that he would need to actually run. So keep it very light, focus on what's going on in the stands, focus on whatever your girlfriend or your mother waving at you. Those were all things which I look back and I go, if we had done that, I think we would have been better off. But I was in an era of real parity. We competed every week, and every week somebody else won. And I think because there was no one really dominant person for quite some time in my era, I think that led to everybody being maybe a little bit more serious than we needed to be.
Yeah, Gary, obviously, like we've been talking about the bravado behind the blocks. I think we talked about it when we had you on a little bit before. Is this something that, like I said, you kind of developed over the years, or something that you think was just inside you the whole time, that kind of bravado or confidence behind the block? And then maybe, Ato, I'd love to hear more about what you think, looking back now. You said maybe that wasn't the right way, or you'd go about it differently, what you might change nowadays.
Well, it was something, hamming it up was something that I have always done. I was a natural face maker. I mean, you couldn't take a picture, a group photo, without me doing something weird. It's just like that was my personality, me being me. And also, and I was doing that whether I was favored to win or not. I was doing that stuff in high school meets when I was not a fast swimmer at all. I was not going to win the race. I knew that, and so people have cited that as wow, he really, the confidence to be able to make these predictions, and everything like that. That was trash talking in high school that I couldn't back up, and that was just part of the fun of the sport. So I took that to, kept it in the back pocket of my Speedo up to the Olympic level, and just continued to do it. And, I was shadow boxing and hamming it up, behind the blocks in '96, with standing right next to Popov. It was unbeatable. Scientists were declaring, that he was physically impossible to beat. And so for me, it was enjoying the moment, being present in the moment, right? Like, it did alleviate stress, as opposed to other people that just assumed that it would have contributed because you make these predictions. You better follow up with it. Yeah, that's true. I understood that, but it was also in some ways alleviating the pressure. And more than anything, just embracing the moment, enjoying it. Like you talk about, like what the things you watch a horse do before it gets into the gates before a race. Yeah, I'm watching the swimmers behind the blocks, and I'm looking for somebody who's smiling. Like if you can see somebody, just even if it's like crack a smile, like a little smirk or something like that, bet on that guy. Anybody who has the ability just to kind of relax a little bit and just enjoy it, right? Have some fun with it. Yeah, it's super intense. Yeah, the stakes super high. Yeah, we know. But it's the Olympic Games. You've worked your entire life to get here. Like, stop. Have some fun with it.
Gary makes a great point. And I'm telling you, what he's saying is accurate. And here's how I know what he's saying is accurate. I don't remember. I mean, obviously, you remember your Olympic moments, but my personal best, both in the 100 and in the 200, neither of them came in the Olympic Games. There's a reason for that. I was more Gary Hall Jr. on the circuit, right? Where it was like me and Maurice Green or whoever, and we were same thing, kind of hamming it up. And oh yeah, we got to go kick these guys' asses and let's go. And that's where my best performances were. And then in the Olympics, it was like, And the reality is, I would say my best 2 or 3 times, certainly in the 100, are on the circuit. They're not in the Olympic Games. I ran fast in the Olympic Games, but you have to go a little further down in my progression to find that. So to me, that echoes what Gary's saying, and that is that being in the moment, I think, is better for ultimate performance.
Is that natural? Is it natural? Is it natural to be able to calm down and be loose in those peak moments? Or, obviously you've had time to reflect on your career at this point. Do you think that if you had, the immediate reflection early on in your career that, can you learn it? Can you practice it? Or is it just innate?
I think you can. You know what the most important thing is? It's to not be something that you are not. And the reality is that I am not that serious of a guy. But if we sat down and watched my Olympic finals, you wouldn't think that. You'd be like, whoa, I'm gonna like cross the street if he's walking towards me. So it goes back to what I was saying about being who you are and being in that moment without feeling like you have to have this facade of, I must break you. It's not, it's like, no, don't use those. I was in 5 Olympic finals, right? Anybody who's been in an Olympic final will tell you, you remember them like the birth of your children. They are so special. And to have almost sullied them by this, oh my gosh, it's the Olympic final, I have to like be all badass. It's like, in retrospect, that wasn't the move.
That's the key there. Ato, you're 22 years old. For those who are not watching, in 1996, Ato was 22, and Trinidad had won 1 gold medal ever in his entire Olympic history. And the entire country said, this is it. He stood on the blocks to win the 2nd gold medal ever. And you lost you had that job interview that you failed. You had no idea about track, no idea. And they said you failed of a bronze and you lost by how much? You can't prepare for that at a 22-year-old. You only get that from experience or it's experience, it's maturity, and it relies on good backgrounds, good coaching, good family, good grounding, and good teammates who might write the hammer of justice on your bicep before you win bronze in Athens. It requires that stuff, isn't it, guys? Seriously.
Like George Bovell, yes.
I want to say, yeah, the experience is it's necessary. But I had a really unique upbringing. My father was world swimmer of the year twice, 10 world records. Just top level.
No pressure.
He went to the Olympics 3 times and the individual gold medal evaded me. He won 2 silvers and a bronze.
Wow.
And he was favored to win multiple races in each of those games. And as a child, I remember watching him behind the blocks, and he was just frozen. You could see it in his face. And the leg bouncing, the knee bouncing up and down, as he's sitting there, and his face is white. And, similarly, he was, accused of failing, with 2 silvers and a bronze. And I was aware of that. I mean, before I could articulate, I think that there was a lesson in my father's experience and seeing and knowing what he did to prepare himself. His coach had him do something like 10 200s butterfly before the finals of his, just to try to get out the nerves because he was so tense and just
I'm not a swimmer, but
That's like 10 miles, Ato. That's like 10 miles all out.
10 200s, but don't freak out. Don't look like you've seen a ghost.
Yeah.
And I think that's why his advice to me was have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess individually, experience can be gained different ways. Obviously, for a lot, it's in the moment, going to those things. But like Gary's saying, perhaps getting experience from seeing from others, and some people can internalize that into actually that full experience and then translate it into things they haven't even been to. So I think, like you guys are saying, everyone's a little bit different. You have to be able to do what is natural to you, and sometimes it comes quicker than others, whether it's mental maturity or physical maturity as well.
Let's get into a bit of training. So Gary, I posted a little flashback saying, track guys, they don't train like mile guys. They don't train for the mile guys. Ato is like a marathon for you, right? So I'm like, you saying isn't trained for the marathon.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how you train Brianna right now. Brianna, who doesn't know, is one of the fastest under 18s ever, I think, and now one of the fastest in the world. How did you train? I think track has so much to teach swimming about sprinting. We had a young kid on last week. Gary, he goes 21.8 unrested, unshaved, and he's 18 years old, and he warms up with 25s. That's all he does. That's his meet warm up is 25s. And we blew our mind to hear that. But I don't think that would blow Ato's mind. Ato, how did you warm up for 100? Just talk to me about where you guys want to start. Training? Like training for the 100? You guys have
preparation of the current athlete that Ato's working with.
There we go.
Say again?
Like Luke said, the current training is at Brianna.
Yeah.
What are some of the standards?
Yeah, her name is Brianna Williams. She's born and raised here. As I said, I got to Miramar, Florida in 2008 when I moved to Florida, and discovered her. But I didn't discover her. She was already running well. But I started sort of overseeing her program about 7 or 8 years ago. So she's born here. Her mother's from Jamaica, and she decided she wanted to represent Jamaica, which is rare. Usually it's like a Jamaican athlete deciding that they want to come run for the United States. Like somebody.
Is your mom from Ato? Your mom's from Jamaica?
My mother's also from Jamaica. Yeah, my father's from Trinidad. My mother's from Jamaica, so I get the best of both worlds. Brianna, you could see Brianna is a bona fide prodigy, and I was a world under 20 champion when I was 18, and that was a big deal at the time because I was the first to do certain things. But when I saw Brianna, I was like, that is a bona fide prodigy. In terms of how I train her, I look back at my own training, and I think swimming has elements of this where even it's almost like saying, for you to be a 50-meter champion, you have to be able to swim a decent half mile or quarter mile or actual mile. And that I was at the tail end of that sort of thinking. I can tell you that one of the things that I did when I got into the industry is I said, this doesn't make any sense. All this half speed stuff and long stuff and just breaking down this young body for her to go, to perform for 10 seconds or 22 seconds, as the case may be, cannot be right. And for me, I had to literally take a lot of what I knew as gospel and say, you know what? I'm just gonna figure it out as I go. I'm gonna talk to people who know more than me. I'm gonna rely on the thing that I talked about before, the numbers. And what Brianna has been able to do is nothing short of amazing, because I think it's because I was willing to buck the system and go against what the trends are. So Brianna at 18, fastest under 18 ever, a high school record and all that stuff. And it's not because I'm the greatest coach ever, because I've only been doing it 4 or 5 years. It's because I look at her and I feel the pressure of, that's not a Ford in my garage, that's a Ferrari. And if it's a Ferrari, you have to be a Ferrari level coach. So I know that that's something which in swimming is very controversial. Long to short and all that stuff. That's a debate that happens in our sport too. But I'm telling you, we're getting away from it, because the coaches that I respect, they don't have their sprinters doing long, I don't want to say cross country, but stuff that's way too long, that's training the wrong muscles, that's fatiguing them, that's actually not event specific. Track and field has gone, the ones who are at the top of the podium, we have gone from this very, very big, wide base to maybe a much narrower base that's going a lot higher.
I hate to do this. What's the hardest set you've given her? I hate to talk practice, but I want the swimmers who are listening to have an idea of the kind of quality that you give to her. And the hardest set could be literally 10 seconds of perfect. What's the hardest set you give Brianna?
So there's a workout which I did, which I haven't modified much, but it is it's so in the wheelhouse of what she has to do for a living. You guys, 400-meter track, right? Separated into 400s. She does 7 of those. So she goes 100, sprints 100, walks back. Sprints 100, walks back. To get all the way around, it takes 7. We've done 50 other workouts, but she'll tell you that one's the hardest, because when she gets really ready to perform, her personal best is 10.94. When she gets really ready to perform, she can run each of those in about 11.5 all the way around and give you 11.1 on the final one.
How much rest?
Say again?
How much rest?
The rest is the walk back. So maybe that's about a minute and a half of recovery. But your heart rate is so high, and you have to sprint at such high levels of fatigue that when you get done with that and you get into a really nice taper, yeah, you're watching her, cruise through and run 11.1 rounds, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. It's like she's doing it in practice. But again, that's a big shift from, okay, go out there, Brianna, and run 5 300s. Can she do it? Yes. But first of all, she's going to dog the last 2, because after 2, she's done. And I have to remember, she's 18. I can't give her adult workout. She's just 18. She is 5'4", 125 pounds. So I have had to kind of look at what I have and try to be as good as I think she is, because I see a lot of athletes, some of her peers, quite frankly. There's kids that came up with her in Florida, and you'll never hear their names again. And they were equally as talented, because they had some coach that decided, nope, I came from the school of my sprinters are going to be able to run a good 800, and they're going to be able to run repeat quarters. And it's like, yeah, sure, you can do that. And now those kids are shadows of themselves, because literally you have emptied the tank, and now they're 19 and they have nothing left.
Yeah, Otto, the comment about a swimmer warming up with 25s is sort of like the equivalent of somebody saying, ever seen a cheetah warm up? I'm really curious, like what's a proper warm up for a 100-meter?
We could have a long conversation about that. I am from the school of short, dynamic, intense warm-ups. So that means that, okay, Brianna's opener is in 2 weeks. She will start with 6 strides, and then she'll do some practice on how she's going to come out of the blocks. We call those dry phase drills. And then she's going to, get a little adjustment or whatever. And she steps on that track. She puts on her spikes, and she does maybe 3 or 4 all out 60 meters. And once she feels like, and once I have to look at her, when I see that she's feeling it and her movements look right, then she's ready. She doesn't stretch before she runs. That's old school. She doesn't stretch. She doesn't do a whole lot of, she doesn't get to warm up with music, which I know, Gary's like, what? But yeah, it's very short, but it's very dynamic and it's very intense.
Gary, have you
comment? Yeah.
Well, comment on what?
I love to think what you think about this. Like, did Mike give you these kind of warm-ups? Like, you hear about Popov doing cold hundreds off the blocks sometimes. I mean, comment on this stuff. Did you miss this kind of stuff? Did you do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, no. There were plenty of times, even at major competitions, the Olympics or World Championships, I remember just getting up on the blocks before finals, doing 125 off the blocks, and if it felt good, that was it. I would get out, go to the showers, and that was it. That was my warm up. So I've done less than a 25 for a warm up. There's so much swimming done before that, and it's making sure your body's feeling right, but also your mind's in the right place. But it's just feeling the water. It's just an explosive burst. In terms of the training stuff, I really, really appreciate what Ato is saying. It's just, it was so frustrating. It's something that I was trying to, talk about as a young swimmer. Not understanding why everybody in the pool, didn't matter if you were a miler or a freestyler or a butterflyer or an IMer, everybody's doing the exact same workout. I wasn't responding well to the workout, and it was just so frustrating. And it was something that I learned so much, and this is pertinent to our conversation here, correlating track and field and swimming mindset. I specifically remember asking, and we talked about it in the previous episode, Coach, at 14 years old, 15 years old, Coach, why are we all doing the same workout? In track and field, the sprinters aren't doing the same as the cross-country guys.
Right.
Everybody's doing the same workout here in swimming. And I learned, I made this incredible friendship and connection with Mark Foster, 5-time Olympian from England. And Mark, again, a reputation as being kind of an outside the box guy, uncontrollable maybe by some of the coaches and authorities in the sport. But he started training with Colin Jackson, and Colin and Mark both have since come out, but they were closeted at the time, so they had that bond in common. I don't know what the relationship, but they were friends. And Mark started hanging out, learning from Colin what the track and field guys were doing. And Colin was, it became clear to Mark that track and field was so much more advanced in terms of how to train their athletes. And it was so refreshing to have that perspective. Once I connected and became friends with Mark and started training with him, I was downloading everything that he had learned from Colin in the world of track and field. And, he was, I think 110 hurdles or something was his event.
Explosive.
And so we started doing the workouts that he was doing on the track. So we were fortunate in both Phoenix and the Florida Keys to have a track, a huge open grass field right next to the pool, where we were doing sprint training from track and field, change of speed type of stuff. I loved hearing the set that you're talking about it with Brianna, because you can get your heart rate up so much higher than you can in the pool. And what the coaches were trying to achieve with 10,000 meters could never be accomplished in a 15-yard dash, on the track. And so, yeah, I was so appreciative of that friendship with Mark, and his friend, vicariously through Colin, what he learned and shared with the race club in its earliest days that benefited all of us.
So I trained with the first guy to break 19 seconds on the short course yards, 50 free, Fred Biscay. He and another teammate of mine were the first guys under 21 seconds long course in the 50 free, super suited for sure. But there's a mentality of those guys that they could see past it. At the time when Fred went 18.7, that was 0.3 of a second faster than what everyone had been stuck at 19.0 for 20 years prior. I think it was 20. I'm wondering about, what is it about sprinters specifically that break huge barriers? I mean, we've talked a fair amount about Bolt. From either of your careers, other competitors that you've had, or people that you observed, is there something about the people that are breaking those barriers that you feel is a characteristic or stands out? What stands out about those people?
Are you asking me?
Then both, either one. Yeah. If you've got anything, go for it. Or maybe not.
I'm waiting on him. I'll just say this. We've talked about Bolt quite a bit, and but the truth is that I think about Michael Johnson and his golden run in 1996 in the Olympic Games. I think a lot of people who have these breakthrough performances dig a little deeper, go back a little further, and you'll realize that a lot of the times they showed you a glimpse of it, and sometimes everybody didn't get the message. And here's an example. In 1991, 5 years before Atlanta, Michael Johnson is a relative unknown. He goes to the World Championships and he runs like 20 flat. And people go, oh yeah, it's not a bad time. And you look at the wind reading, and the wind reading is like minus 3.3. And you go, oh, wait a minute. If the world record is 19.7, he just ran 20 flat into that wind. That's basically the world record. But people, again, this is my numbers. People they either overlook it, or it doesn't become sort of a mainstream recognition, and it just sort of gets lost. Then he runs 19.3 in the golden shoes, and people go, oh my gosh, this is like, who could have ever seen this coming? Well, somebody who paid attention in 1991. Usain Bolt at 17 years old on a chilly evening in Bermuda at the Carifta Games, which is sort of the Caribbean Junior Championships for track and field. Mm-hmm. He runs 1993. I have said I think that's going to be the world junior record when Christ comes back. 1993 may not mean anything to your viewers tonight, but the fact is, 1993 in the 200 meters would have been second to a now grown-up Usain Bolt in Beijing in 2008. Now it puts it in perspective. So he showed you a glimpse of it before if you were willing to pay attention. This is a 17-year-old who ran a time that would have been second only to himself in the Olympics, some time later. So my experience has been a lot of the times, if you paid attention, you would have seen it coming. Very few people just show up and it's like, oh my gosh, we could have never foreseen this. The truth is that most of them will have given you some sort of an inkling before, if you have the eye to notice it.
Don't talk about the audience, guys. Talk about yourself. Ato, you sending out blocks, and you knew the world record was what? When you were racing, it was like 9.84 or something, Donovan's record or what have you.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah, it was 90. It was 94 for a while.
Was that your barrier? Was like, oh, there's no way we're gonna go 9.7. Like, could you? Oh, you didn't give a shit. You were like, you know what? One day I might go 9.6, guys. I don't give it. Like talk about what was your mindset on the blocks when you saw Gary, when you saw a 21.5 was the world record. Like, that's not the barrier to speed. The barrier to speed is what I determine it's going to be. Was that your confidence? Ato, I mean, your best times in 9.86, 9.84 was a world record then.
Not okay. So when I when I turned professional, the world record is 9.85. 9.85. It gets broken. It gets broken against me in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I was very, very unlucky because I ran 9.86 on 4 different occasions. On 2 of those occasions, the world record was 9.84, and I ran it into headwind. So I ran a faster equivalent time, but that's neither here nor there. We never looked at the world record until 1932. When Michael Johnson ran 1932, I knew that even though that was my better event, I was never going to run that. I couldn't figure out how I was going to find another half of a second in my own career. But the 100, up until the day I retired, I always felt like, no, the 100-meter record could happen because I had been so close for so long. And I think been so unlucky with headwinds and so on. But no, we never stood in reverence of the 100-meter record. And I think that's why, I mean, well, I scared it a bunch of times, and Maurice Green eventually broke it.
Guys, I want to close it off with a few rapid fire questions. We're going to ping pong back and forth between you and Ato. We're going to start off with a question we ask all of our guests for swimming, but what is the hardest race in track and field?
The hardest race in track and field is the 400 meters.
Olympic gold or world record, Ato?
Olympic gold every day and twice on Sunday.
Gary, who is the better showman, you or Usain Bolt?
2 pages from the same book.
Gary, is it true that you could kick a 50 meter underwater holding a cinder block with no breath?
Yeah.
Jeez. Ato, what would Bolt's best time be if he trained for the 100? What could he go? Trained for the 400. What could he go?
42.8. The world record right now is 43.03.
Okay. Ato, swimming got rid of multiple false starts, thankfully. Should track and field get rid of multiple false starts?
Yeah, they did. In 2010, we went to a 1 and you're done. Usain Bolt got thrown out in 2011 out of the World Championships. Something else I predicted, and everybody said, "No, you're crazy. He never false starts." But yeah, we did.
Okay. What's the best track world record on the books?
I'd have to say the one that's lasted the longest, and that's by my friend Kevin Young, 46.78 for the 400-meter hurdles. It was set in Barcelona in 1992, and everybody thought, oh, it'll last a year. Well, guess what? It's now lasted a lot longer than a year. It's almost 30 years old.
Jeez. Gary, who's got more sex appeal, track athletes, sprinters, or swimmers?
You really put me on the spot. I was expecting like a softball pitch. You're asking me all the hard questions.
Ato, who's got more sex appeal?
Oh, of course I'm gonna say sprinter. But it's not a fair fight. These guys are in their like their underwear, right? We've got chain. We got gold chains on and earrings and glasses and stuff. That's not a fair fight. So I'll answer the question that way.
All right, Gary, is sub 20 seconds in a long course 50 freestyle possible?
Yes.
Ato, is sub 9 seconds in 100-meter possible?
Yes, we'll all be long gone by the time it happens.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been fun to talk about speed and to get to chat with 2 elites of their sport. So we really appreciate you doing it. Gang, yeah, it's been a fun time. That's it for this episode of the Social Kick Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.